Hi, my name is Shantelle. Here we are again for the story time every day at 7. Today we're going to be reading Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a man whose first wife died and who married for the second time the haughtiest and proudest woman in the world. She had 2 daughters who took after her in every way. The man had a young daughter from his first marriage, but she was a sweet and kind girl. She took after her mother, who had been the nicest person in the world. The man's new wife could not stand this young girl's good qualities, which made her daughters seem even more detestable. She ordered her to do the dirtiest work around the house. She was the one who did the dishes, cleaned the stairs, and polished all the rooms. She was made to sleep in the attic on a very hard mattress, while the 2 sisters had rooms with polished floors, where they slept in soft beds and had mirrors in which they could see themselves from head to toe. The poor girl suffered in silence and did not dare to complain to her father. When the housework was done, she would go to the fireplace and sit in the ashes. The spiteful sisters thought this was very funny and gave her the name of Cinderella. But although the poor girl had to wear old-fashioned, ragged, cast-off clothes, she was still 100 times more beautiful than the 2 sisters, even in their most magnificent dresses. So this is Cinderella. Now it happened that the king's son organized a ball and sent out invitations to all the important people of the country. When the 2 sisters received their invitation, they were delighted and spent all their time choosing the clothes and the hairstyles that they would wear to the ball. This caused a great deal of extra work for Cinderella, because she was the one who had to iron the clothes and starch the lace collars. The only thing they could talk about was the way they would be dressed. "I will wear my red velvet dress with lace trimming," said one. "I will wear my cloak embroidered with golden flowers and my diamond brooch," said her sister. Of course, Cinderella was called to help. She gave them the best advice she could, and even offered to do their hair. They said to her, "Cinderella, wouldn't you like to go to the ball? With your raggedy clothes and dirty face, what a sight you'd be!" Cinderella blushed, for inside she really did want to go to the ball. "Sisters, you are laughing at me. That makes it even worse," she said. "You are right. Everyone would have a good laugh if they saw Cinderella at the ball," sneered the pair. Then Cinderella had an idea. "Maybe I could go to the ball," she said. "Won't you please lend me the yellow dress that you wear around the house, so I can go with you?" "Really, I don't think so," exclaimed the elder sister. "Lend my dress to such a grubby little Cinders? You must think I'm stupid." And so the matter was closed. You couldn't have blamed Cinderella if she had completely ruined the sisters' hair, but she was a kind girl, and arranged it beautifully, although they did not thank her for it. The sisters were so excited that they could not eat for 2 days before the ball. They broke more than a dozen corset laces, because they pulled them in so tightly in order to make themselves look slender, and they were constantly primping in front of the mirror. At last the great day arrived. Poor Cinderella waved goodbye to the sisters. Then she sat down at the fireplace and began to weep. Her godmother, who saw her bitter tears, asked her what was wrong. I want to... Cinderella was crying so hard that she could not get the words out. But the godmother, who was also a fairy, said, "You would like to go to the ball, wouldn't you?" "Yes," sighed Cinderella. "Well, if you are a good girl, I will send you there," said her fairy godmother. She began to give Cinderella the most peculiar instructions. "Go into the garden and bring me a pumpkin," she said. Cinderella went and picked the most beautiful pumpkin she could find. She took it indoors to her fairy godmother, although she was wondering how a pumpkin was going to help her get to the ball. Her fairy godmother hollowed it out until there was nothing left but the shell, tapped it with her magic wand, and the pumpkin had changed into a beautiful golden carriage. Then the fairy godmother looked in the mouse trap, where she found 6 live mice. She told Cinderella to lift up the lid of the trap and to let the mice out one by one. As the mice crept out, she tapped them with her magic wand, which changed them into beautiful horses to draw the carriage. Then she wondered what could serve as a coachman. "I will see if there is a rat in the rat trap," said Cinderella. "A rat would make a good coachman." Cinderella fetched the rat trap, which had 3... This is the fairy godmother working her magic. 3 fat rats in it. The fairy godmother chose the one with the finest whiskers. When she touched it with the magic wand, it changed into a coachman with the most handsome mustache in the world. Then she said to Cinderella, "Go and look behind the watering can. You will find 6 lizards there. Bring them to me." Cinderella had no sooner brought them to her fairy godmother, that she changed them into footmen. They stepped up behind the carriage with their brightly patterned uniforms and hung on as if they had never done anything else in their lives. Then the fairy godmother said, "Well, now you can go to the ball in style. Aren't you delighted?" "Yes, but how can I possibly go to the ball in these wretched clothes?" replied the girl. Just one touch of the magic wand changed Cinderella's drags into a dress of gold and silver material, embroidered with precious stones. Finally, the fairy godmother gave her a pair of glass slippers. All dressed up, Cinderella got into the carriage. Her fairy godmother warned her to be home by midnight, for the spell would break at the 12th chime of the clock. The girl promised her fairy godmother that she would, and drove off. The king's son had been told that an unknown princess was about to arrive at the ball, so he ran outside to welcome her. He helped Cinderella down from the carriage and led her into the ballroom. As soon as everyone saw her, they were awestruck. The dancing ceased and the fiddlers stopped playing as they all admired her perfect beauty. Even the king himself, although he was an old man, could not keep his eyes off her, and he whispered to the queen that he had not seen such a beautiful young lady for a long time. The queen agreed with him, for truly the beautiful stranger outshone every other person in the room. All the women studied her hairstyle and dress closely, wondering what far-off country could produce such elegant gowns in such magnificent materials. They were determined to remember every last detail, so that they would be able to copy them next time there was a grand occasion. The prince seated Cinderella in the best place, and paid her many compliments. Then, later, he led her to the dance floor. She danced so gracefully that everyone admired her even more. After the first round of dances, there was a fine banquet. But the prince could not eat anything because he was too absorbed with the lovely stranger. Cinderella sat next to the sisters and gave them all her attention, offering them oranges and lemons, which the prince had given her. They were extremely surprised, but they did not recognize her at all. Then the dancing started again. All the young men wanted to dance with the lovely girl, but the prince didn't give anyone a chance. Cinderella danced every dance with the prince, and when they rested, he stayed at her side, making sure that she wanted for nothing. Cinderella had never been happier in her life. Indeed, she was so absorbed with the handsome young man and his attention that she quite forgot her fairy godmother's warning. Then the palace clock began to chime. At the first stroke of midnight, Cinderella realized her mistake and sprang to her feet. fleeing the ballroom. The prince followed, but he could not catch her. However, in her hurry, she dropped one of her dainty glass slippers. Still, the young girl ran and ran, not stopping to pick it up or even to look behind her. Cinderella arrived home exhausted, without a carriage or her footman, and dressed in her old clothes. Nothing remained of her splendor but the other glass slipper. The prince asked the guards at the palace door if they had seen the princess leave. They said they had not seen anyone go out but a young girl dressed in rags, who looked more like a farmer's daughter than a lady. When the sisters came home a little later on, Cinderella asked if they'd enjoyed the ball. Excitedly, they told her about the beautiful stranger who'd captivated the prince, and how she had run off suddenly into the night, leaving one slipper in the palace steps. They told her that the prince had picked up the fallen glass slipper and had gazed at it for the rest of the night. He had definitely fallen head over heels in love with the beautiful stranger, even though he didn't know who she was. The sisters were telling the truth, for a few days later, the king's son publicly announced that he would marry the girl whose foot would fit perfectly inside the slipper. But although all of the princesses, then all of the duchesses, and then all of the rest of the court ladies in the land tried it on, not one could fit the delicate shoe. The slipper was eventually brought to the two sisters, who squeezed and pushed and pushed and squeezed, and tried with all their might to fit a foot into it, but all in vain. Then Cinderella smiled and said, "I would like to try the slipper and see if it fits me." The sisters laughed and made fun of her, but the courtier had been given orders to let all the girls in the land try on the slipper. So he sat Cinderella down, and, to everyone's surprise, the slipper fit perfectly. The two sisters were astonished, but not half as astonished as they were when Cinderella took the other glass slipper from her pocket and put it on. At this moment, the fairy godmother appeared and tapped Cinderella's clothes with her magic wand. At once, the rags changed into a dress even more beautiful than the ones she had worn before. Then the sisters recognized her as the kind lady they had met at the ball. They dropped to their knees and begged her to forgive them for all the suffering they had caused her. Cinderella embraced them and said that she forgave them with all her heart. Then she was taken to the prince in her splendid dress. He thought she was more beautiful than ever, and, a few days later, he married her. And of course, you don't need me to tell you that they lived happily ever after. Okay, that's it for today, guys. Come back tomorrow at 7 for the next story. All that coughing in the background is because we have someone who's sick at the house, so. Bye, have a nice night.